Let's talk about preparing yourself for coaching. It's really all in the attitude, a positive attitude. When you work with someone, it's a great idea to get yourself in a positive frame of mind before you work with them. And that doesn't mean putting on a happy face and, being a person who is pretending to be excited about the coaching experience. Because let's face it, we can do that. We can walk into a coaching environment and pretend to be excited about being there, but it's not really going to last. It's not going to persist. What I'm talking about is you really being into what you're doing, really being into the whole concept of coaching. And if you're not excited about coaching and working with people and helping them improve and helping them strive for higher and higher goals in their lives, then you really shouldn't be involved in coaching at all. And I think about certain people in the past who I've come into contact with or heard about who went into certain professions just for the money. And I'm talking about people who are chiropractors and medical doctors, and they went into the profession not for the idea of helping other people and getting them better and making them more healthy and productive in the world and so forth, but they went into it for money. They heard that if you go to chiropractic school, you can make a lot of money. Or if you go to medical school, you can make a lot of money. Now, luckily, when it comes to these programs, some of them are fairly rigorous. Depending on the person and their disposition in the school, they can be extremely rigorous and extremely demanding, which is great because that weeds out people who really aren't into it. And that's what a lot of undergraduate classes are designed to do, chemistry and physics and calculus. Hey, if you're really into becoming a medical doctor, why don't you try these classes? See how you do. How do you like it now? And if you don't like it, you get out. And if you get into medical school and you start dealing with patients and their illnesses and hearing them complain about things, you can drop out. You can get out of the game before it goes too far. So a lot of the system is set up to weed out people who really aren't fit for that type of career. However, some people will still push themselves through it and act as if they really do want to be doctors, or it could be anything, lawyers or anything at all, you name it. They can do anything and just do it for the money. It doesn't have to be even what we would call a professional job. However, what's going to happen is that you're not going to be able to walk into the situation with genuine happiness. You're not going to be able to walk into it and say, hey, I'm here. Let's make this happen. Let's go ahead and go for it. You're not going to be able to have that. So what I want you to do, some soul searching, make sure that you want to be a life coach, and that's going to take care of your positive attitude. Okay, preparing yourself for coaching also means that you have a moral obligation to your client. And this covers a lot of territory. This means that you're never going to work with them beyond your usefulness. If you're not useful to them anymore, you're going to discontinue the coaching client relationship. And remember, as I've said, it's important that you always work toward this. As odd as that sounds, you're always working toward the goal of you not being necessary anymore. I know that's going to be difficult for you to accept initially, but realize that that's what's going to lead to wonderful testimonials. That's what's going to lead to them wanting you to do more and more and more. If you're constantly empowering people, stepping into a situation saying, hey, I'm a life coach and you're paying me, I'm doing all this stuff for you, but here's how you can do it. Here's a system that I'm going to design for you that anyone can use. You can use it, your staff can use it, anyone can use it. By doing that, you become a valuable asset in the company. And remember, you're still working toward ending your job. You're still working toward not being needed. But by doing that, you're going to give so much that you are going to be needed. You're going to be needed in something else. So let go of this idea of coming up with excuses for you to continue working and continue coaching them, and realize that all you have to do is give everything you've got, empower them, empower the team, and they will find other opportunities for you. That's part of your moral obligation. Another part of it is for you to really focus on giving honest help to them. Now, this means that if you are in an area which is unclear for you, let's say they suddenly ask you to handle the nutritional needs of their staff and make sure that everyone on the staff has their nutritional needs met. Well, you may not be a nutritionally oriented person. You may not know anything about nutrition, or maybe you know a little bit about it. If you're in over your head, always get someone else in on the team to handle things. But your moral obligation goes into many facets. My overall point here is be honest and always do what's best for the team. Let's talk about balancing and talking and listening. Balancing, talking, and listening, because when we balance talking and listening, we're balancing the give and take, the ebb and flow. We're balancing everything. So many times, people in any situation can get really caught up in just talking. I was talking with a real estate agent recently in Southern California. He was showing me around La Jolla. Beautiful area. Wonderful homes. Tony Robbins' home was for sale, by the way, for about $15 million. All kinds of wonderful, beautiful homes. And the real estate agent kept on talking. He would talk about the real estate. He would talk about his personal life. He would talk about what's going on in his future. And the few times that I attempted to interject something and say something about myself, he got the subject right back to himself. Well, how good do you think that is in terms of establishing rapport, especially with someone who's about to make a potentially very large purchase? How good do you think that is? How good of an idea do you think that is? Not very good. He was kind of my life coach in a limited sense in real estate. I'm working with him, riding around, depending on him to show me the area, to tell me what's going on. And it was a constant bombardment of information about him. When I attempted to share a little bit about me, it was blocked, it was deflected, and it was taken right back to talking about him. Well, you need to balance talking and listening. Let's look at the other end of the spectrum. Sometimes when I first started working in hypnotherapy, clients would come into my office and they would talk for an hour straight. An hour straight. I would have a 2-hour session with them, 1 hour of talking with them, getting to know them, and the second hour was devoted to hypnotherapy. So, for the first hour, when I first started out, many times clients would come in and just machine gun me with their information. This is what's going on, that's what's going on, because they hadn't talked to anyone, they hadn't opened up in a long time, and they were letting it all spill out. Well, when I first started, I didn't really know any better. I would just let them go on for an hour. Not everyone did this, but a lot of patients did. And rather than having an ebb and flow, a give and take, a talking and listening session, I was just listening. I was just taking it. Everything was coming at me, kind of like the real estate situation. Eventually, I learned that that's not really productive. That's not really helpful. I was getting a lot of information from them that I could use for the session, but eventually I learned that I need to guide the conversation. I need to be part of the conversation, if for nothing else than the perception of value. They need to realize that they're getting something from me rather than just someone to talk to. Putting the client first means kind of like what I was talking about with the real estate agent. What is the client interested in? Does a client want to hear about your personal life? Does a client want to hear about your plans for 10 years from now to buy certain cars and certain houses? This is the kind of stuff I was having to listen to while I was looking at property. Or does your client want to be first? I want to tell you that what I've noticed in customer service when I go to stores is something that's a steady decline. Now, this may be a sign of my age. I don't know. I think as people get to a certain age, they eventually start complaining about everything. But what I've noticed is that I see police officers who are on their cell phones. Now, I doubt that it's an official call because they have a little walkie-talkie that's usually up around their shoulder for that. I see them on their cell phones. I see people who are checking out people in aisles in department stores on cell phones. When I go to restaurants, I hear the staff talking about their shift. I'm on this shift. I'm on that shift. Oh, I'd like to get on that shift. When I go to other restaurants and there's a chef preparing something like a sushi restaurant, for example, I hear them talking to the staff in the back, telling them, we need this and we need that, and why are you late, and so forth and so on. This is extremely unprofessional, and I think it's a sign of the times. I think that people, in many cases, in those types of jobs, they're really not into dealing with the customer and making the experience all about the customer. When you deal with your client, that's your customer, and you need to make the experience all about the customer. It's all about them. You don't have a life. You don't have a personal life. You don't have any other life except with them unless they talk about it. Then your life comes alive. Then you can talk about your personal life, what's going on with you, your loved ones, your travel plans, etc. Then you have a life. But if they don't talk about that with you, you do not bring that into the conversation. It's all about them. Everything is about them. And the more of this you practice, the more they're going to perceive you as a professional. Now, you do need to balance this a little bit because they want to see you as a well-rounded human, of course, but you want to keep everything in your personal life personal unless they ask you about it. How was your weekend? What are you going to do in the future, etc.? You're not there to offer things about that because they're not interested in that. They're paying you for a service. They want it to be about them. So keep client first. I want to talk to you about how to develop relationships with your clients. First of all, you need to have boundaries clearly set for yourself and for your clients. Your clients, unless they invite you to do something, are not people who you go out drinking with, not people who you go to parties with, and so forth, unless they invite you. Now, realize as a life coach, you have a lot of freedom, whereas a licensed counselor or a medical doctor would have limitations. You don't. A licensed professional would have limitations which would say that you do not associate with them under any circumstances personally. You keep it all professional. This is to avoid anything that may lead to a relationship that might develop, which is a huge no-no. However, as a life coach, you don't have these limitations. You don't have these legal limitations unless somehow in your area they've written some law about it. In most cases, the term life coach isn't strictly regulated by a set of laws or a set of rules by an organization. This means that you have to regulate yourself. This means that you have to come up with boundaries, clearly set boundaries, set for yourself and for your clients. Now, if they invite you to go out with them and hang out with their friends and associates, I suggest that you do that. If you were a licensed psychologist, I would suggest that you never do that because that's a huge no-no. It could lead to all kinds of things that you don't want. However, as a life coach, you can do that. In fact, I encourage you to get into their social network a little bit because that's going to help you understand how to work with them more effectively. However, these are not people you should be dating. These are not people you should be forming a relationship with. These are not people you should be excessively drinking with because if they see you in a compromised position, it could lower the perception of your integrity. When that happens, your job can be in jeopardy. So you want to make sure that you have clearly set boundaries for yourself and your clients and that they understand that. You don't need to spell it out for them. You don't need to say, here are my rules. I will do this. I will not do that. I will do this. I will not do that. But you can teach them over time. As opportunities come up, you can accept certain opportunities and pass on others. Again, I suggest that you weave yourself into their social fabric somewhat because that is going to help you help them. Let's talk about living by example. You want to be an example to your clients. That's why you are there. You have an obligation to be an example. So when you develop a relationship with your clients, you want to set an example. Part of the example you set is by passing on certain opportunities and accepting other opportunities. However, another big part of it is just by living into what you are saying, practicing what you're preaching. If you are telling them that in order to grow their business, they need to devote a certain amount of hours per week to being on the phone, getting cold contacts, just calling a list of people they don't even know and talking to them, then you should be doing that too. You should be living by example. If your business is in a similar situation, now if you've already got it up and running and everything's fine, you've got more clients than you can handle, and that's wonderful. However, if you feel that you should be doing the same thing because you're at a similar level, then by all means do it. Because what's going to happen? Eventually the finger is going to be pointed at you. They're going to say, well, how many hours a week do you spend on the phone? And if you say, well, I don't do that because I'm busy coaching you, they're going to say, well, is that some kind of an excuse? Because you've told me that excuses aren't acceptable, and it sounds like an excuse. Then they're going to start coaching you. So you see what I mean? Don't ever get into the position where you are that vulnerable, where you are under the microscope, where they're suddenly looking at you and saying, wait a minute, he or she doesn't do any of this stuff. They don't do any of this life coaching stuff that are preaching to me all the time. Why would I do it? How would they even know if it works or not when they don't even do it themselves? So the important thing here is to live by example. You are a living, breathing, walking, talking, money-making, successful example of what you are creating in them. So they should be able to look at you, and maybe you're not even as successful as them. That doesn't matter. But they should be able to look at you and see, wait a minute, this works. In their lives, this works. It's creating for them this coaching business that's ongoing and popular and wonderful. What they have, the knowledge they have, the technology they have, works. If I would only apply it in my life, in my business. That's what they should say to themselves internally when they look at your life. So live by example. Let's talk about making sure your clients know where you stand. Now, I've already talked about this a little bit in terms of social interaction. Make sure that they know where you stand, but make sure they know where you stand on a number of things. It's always important to get your biases out on the table. Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Do you believe in what they're doing? Do you believe differently, but you're willing to help them because you believe in basic strategies and that's what you share in common? Let them know where you stand, because this is all part of honesty and developing rapport. If you are a Republican working with a Democrat, it really doesn't matter as long as you have a common ground, as long as you are someone who is able to come in there and help them with what they need help with. It really doesn't matter. So let them know where you stand on all sorts of things. Now, I don't suggest that you bombard them with this information. In other words, right when you walk in, I don't want you to say, yes, I'm a Republican, and I believe in this, and this, and this, and this. You don't need to give them a list. But as they ask your opinion, as they want to get to know you, remember, you're only sharing information with them as it's asked for. They don't care about your life or what's going on with you unless they ask. So always understand that. It's not a negative thing. It's just the fact that they've hired you to do a job. I don't want to hear the waiters in a restaurant talk about their shift. I don't want to hear the sushi chef talk about why someone was late. I don't want to hear any of that. I shouldn't hear any of that. They shouldn't hear any of that from you either unless they ask. If they ask, they have a genuine interest. Sometimes when I'm at a sushi place, I'll ask them certain things about their lives, what's going on. I've asked. I want information. I want them to share. I want to get to know them a little better. That's an opening for them. However, unless the customer gives you an opening, you don't share. But when you do, you make sure they understand exactly where you stand. Where do you stand on certain issues? So letting them know where you stand has to do with having your boundaries, let them know where you stand there, and being clear when asked about what your beliefs really are. You may think that your beliefs are contrary to what that company is standing for, so you're not going to be effective. But you couldn't be further from the truth. As long as you can meet on a common business ground, you'll be fine. For example, you may be working with an animal rights company, and you may not really even care about animals. Doesn't matter. As long as you understand the fundamentals, which is that this is a company. They want to be more successful. They want to reach more people. As long as you understand that and you can work within that framework, your individual stand doesn't really matter. So make sure that you're open and honest. Let them know where you stand at all times and all things, as long as it pertains to what's going on and as long as that is asked for.